A millionaire gets out of the luxury car and his girlfriend freezes when she sees a beggar on the sidewalk. "It looks like your dead son," she screams in shock, almost breathless. The man feels his blood run cold because years ago he had cruelly abandoned someone. But the detail on that beggar's face hides a disturbing secret that no one there could have imagined. On a cold November night in Manhattan, bright lights illuminated the facade of Bernardin, one of the city's most exclusive restaurants. It was the kind of place where every dish cost what a family would spend on a month's worth of shopping. At the corner table was Robert Harrison. At 62, the man radiated the kind of power that only billions of dollars can buy. Perfectly combed gray hair, a tailor-made Italian suit, a Swiss watch worth a house. But it was his eyes that revealed his true nature. Cold, calculating eyes of someone who was used to getting everything he wanted. Across the table, Melissa Carter smiled as she tasted the wine. At 28, she was exactly the kind of woman men like Robert collected. Blonde, tall $40,000 red Versace dress, heiress to a real estate fortune. "This Chateau Margaux is divine, dear," Melissa commented. Robert tilted his head. "Only the best for you, my love. Economics is for ordinary people." "We are not ordinary people." The conversation flowed between sips of wine and filet mignon. Melissa was talking about the charity gala she organized, the trip to Monaco, the new yacht Robert was considering buying. "Do you know what I love most about you?" Melissa asked. "You're so decisive." "He knows what he wants and goes after it without hesitation." Robert smiled. "Decision is power, dear. Weak men hesitate. Strong men act." Dinner ended 2 hours later. Robert didn't even look at the bill before handing over his black card. They left the restaurant arm in arm, the valet already bringing the black Bentley. "Wait here, honey," Robert said. "I'll get your scarf." Melissa waved, her eyes scouring the street. That's when she saw him. Initially, it was just a shadow emerging from an alley. As she approached the light, Melissa saw more details. A man perhaps between 30 and 40 years old. Shaggy beard, long and dirty hair, torn military coat, filthy jeans, laceless sneakers with holes. The beggar held a crumpled paper cup. His steps were uncertain, staggering. When he got closer to the light, his eyes were red from alcohol or tiredness. "Please, ma'am." The voice was rough, broken. "Anything. I just need something to eat." Melissa instinctively took a step back. I don't have any money on hand," she lied automatically. His Hermes bag had thousands in cash. The man nodded, starting to turn around. But it was when the light completely illuminated her face that Melissa felt something icy run down her spine. It was not possible. Green eyes. Not just greens, but emerald green, the specific shade she saw in photos of Robert's house. His dead son. Melissa forced her eyes to check other details. The shape of the face, even hidden by the beard. The thick eyebrows, the nose, the strong chin. And then he saw the neck, a birthmark. Small, irregular, star-shaped. Just below the left ear, just like in Thomas Harrison's photograph. "My God," Melissa whispered. The beggar was already walking away when she noticed his gestures. How he scratched the back of his right neck 3 times when nervous. How his left shoulder got higher when he walked. Details she had seen in old videos of Thomas that Robert kept. Robert left the restaurant at that moment. He began to say something when his gaze fell on the beggar. Robert froze. Melissa had never seen that expression on him. Pure terror. His face turned white as paper, completely drained of color. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The beggar held out the cup. "Lord, please." Robert took a step back, stumbling. His hand flew to his chest. Melissa grabbed Robert's arm tightly. "Robert, look at him." "Look right." Robert couldn't take his eyes away. "Robert," she insisted. He seems..." The words escaped in a horrified whisper. "My God, Robert, he looks exactly like his dead son." Robert ripped his arm out of her grip. "No, don't be ridiculous. He's just a beggar. Let's go now," but the beggar had heard. She took a step towards Robert, narrowing her eyes. Do I know you?" Robert almost ran to the car. "Get in the car, Melissa, now." Melissa couldn't move. He saw recognition in the eyes of the beggar, confusion, and then hope. "Wait." The beggar took another step. The cup fell to the floor. "Your face. I know your face." "Melissa!" Robert was desperate. "Get in the damn car!" Melissa felt Robert's hands pulling at her. As he pushed her into the Bentley, She saw the expression on the beggar's face change. Absolute despair. "Wait," the beggar screamed. "Please, I need..." But Robert was already accelerating. The tires squeaked, leaving the beggar in a cloud of smoke. Inside the car, the silence was deafening. Sweat glistened on Robert's forehead despite the air conditioning. "Robert, what?" Melissa began. "No." The word came out like a bark. "It was just a coincidence. People look alike. Here's New York. Millions of people, Issa. That man was the exact copy of your son. The eyes, the face, the birthmark. I saw it in the photos." Robert ran the red light. Horns sounded. He only stopped 5 blocks later, in an empty parking lot. For a long moment he stood there, hands on the wheel, heavy breathing. Then he turned to Melissa. What she saw in his eyes made her gulp. It wasn't just fear. It was guilt. "That man is not my son. My son is dead. He died 15 years ago in a car accident. I was there. I saw the body. I buried him," but his voice trembled at the last word. And Melissa Carter, who had grown up among world-class liars, knew with absolute certainty that Robert Harrison was lying. And scarier, he knew she knew. Melissa couldn't sleep that night. Lying next to Robert, she stared at the ceiling where shadows danced. Robert had taken 2 sleeping pills, something she had never seen him do. Now he was snoring slightly, but his face was tense, furrowed. When the first rays of sunlight filtered through the curtains, Melissa gave up trying to sleep. Under the shower, he tried to organize his thoughts. There had to be a logical explanation. But that birthmark, and Robert's reaction. She came out of the bathroom and found Robert sitting on the edge of the bed with his head in his hands. "Robert, are you okay?" He raised his head sharply. "I'm great. Why wouldn't I be?" "Because you took sleeping pills for the first time since I've known you." "Because I told you I'm fine." Robert stood up abruptly. Noticing his tone, he took a deep breath. "Sorry, I had nightmares. That beggar reminded me of Thomas. You know what it's like to lose a child." Melissa nodded, but watched Robert get dressed, noticing how his hands trembled as he buttoned his shirt. "I need to go to the office earlier. Important meeting." Melissa waited until she heard the door close. Then he ran to Robert's office. His hands trembled as he opened the drawers. Financial documents, contracts. Nothing unusual. That's when his eyes landed on the framed photograph. Thomas Harrison, smiling, maybe 20 years old. Jeans and simple t-shirt. But it was the eyes. Those impossible green eyes, full of life. The same eyes as the beggar. "It's not possible," Melissa whispered. But he took a photo of the photograph with his cell phone. "I needed to be sure. But to understand what had happened, we need to go back in time. Go back to 15 years ago, when the Harrison family still existed. The Harrison mansion in Connecticut was the American dream materialized. 3 floors of stone and glass, perfect gardens, a pool that looked like a natural lagoon. But within those walls, rot was spreading. Thomas Harrison was 20 years old when his life imploded. He was a sociology student at Columbia, idealistic, believing that the world could be better, everything that his father was not. Sarah Harrison had been a brilliant architect before marrying Robert. Internationally awarded projects, innovative constructions. She was passionate about her work until he met Robert Harrison. The marriage was quick. Robert had been charming, caring. Only later did Sarah see the cracks in the facade. Robert didn't want a working wife. "I wanted a trophy wife." But Sarah kept working despite growing objections, until things started to go wrong. Contracts went to competitors. Customers cancelled meetings. Projects were rejected. His reputation began to unravel. What Sarah didn't know was that Robert was systematically sabotaging her career. Phone calls to customers, payouts to competitors, rumors planted strategically. It took 3 years before Sarah gave up. Exhausted, defeated, convinced that she had lost her talent. Depression has become a constant presence. Robert had gotten what he wanted. A dependent, broken wife. Thomas was 15 years old when his mother stopped working. He saw how she withered, how the light went out, how she began to take more and more medicine. For years, Thomas blamed his mother for giving up. But everything changed on a June afternoon, 3 weeks before his 20th birthday. Thomas went to his father's office to pick up documents. When he entered, he found the office empty. Robert was in a meeting, That's when he saw the file open on the table, a thick folder with Sarah's name on it. Curious, he opened it, and what he found changed everything. Documents proving systematic sabotage, emails between Robert and Sarah's competitors, transcripts of phone calls where Robert destroyed his own wife's reputation, handwritten notes detailing years of manipulation. Thomas stood still, feeling his world fall apart. Every time she saw her mother cry, all the pills she took, all because of him, because of Robert. "Did you find something interesting?" Thomas spun. Robert was at the door, expression too calm. "You destroyed her. You destroyed your own wife." Robert closed the door calmly. "I saved our marriage." His mother was forgetting what was important. Family, home. Family. "She's destroyed, Dad. She barely gets out of bed. He takes so many pills that he doesn't remember his own name." "And she's happy," Robert replied, voice icy. "It has everything it needs. Beautiful house, money, security. Your dignity," Thomas screamed. "Your identity. You stole everything because you couldn't handle her being better than you." The slap came quickly. Robert's palm hit his cheek hard, the sound echoing. "Never," Robert hissed, "never speak to me like that. I am your father. You owe me respect." Thomas touched his burning cheek, feeling blood where he bit his tongue. "You're not my father. A father would not destroy the woman he loves. And get out." "What?" "I said get out. If you think I'm so terrible, then get out of my house. Get out of my life." Thomas picked up the briefcase. "I'm going to show her. I'll show you what you did. If you walk out that door," Robert said, each cutting word, "you're dead to me. I'm going to disinherit you, cut you off from everything. You won't have anything." Thomas looked at the man who had been his father. "I'd rather be nobody than be anything like you." He left, slamming the door. In the hallway, he tried to calm down. He needed to talk to his mother, but when he got to her room, the door was locked. "Mom, I need to talk to you. It's important." "Silence, Mom, please. It's about Dad, about your career." Finally, Sarah's weak voice. "I'm tired, honey. Can we talk tomorrow?" "But Mom..." "Tomorrow, Thomas, please." Thomas leaned his forehead against the door. "Okay, Mom, tomorrow. I love you. I love you too, dear." They were the last words Sarah said to her son. Thomas went back to his room, put the briefcase under the mattress. He fell asleep, exhausted. When he woke up, the mansion was eerily quiet. He went downstairs and saw the ambulance. "No," Thomas whispered, starting to run. Paramedics left carrying a stretcher covered with a white sheet. Robert was at the door talking to a police officer. "What happened?" Thomas screamed. "Where's my mom?" The policeman held him. "I'm sorry, son." "Your mother." She didn't resist. The world stopped. "Accidental overdose of medication," the officer explained. "Your father found her this morning." "It was no accident," Thomas whispered, looking at Robert. "It was..." But Robert was crying. Real tears, broken voice. Everyone around believed. The following days passed in a blur. Funeral, condolences, people Thomas didn't even know. Thomas tried to show the folder to someone, but when he went looking for her, he was gone, looking for something. Robert showed up at the door of the room one night. "You know what?" "Oh, that old folder?" "I threw it away." "Just old papers, irrelevant." "You killed her," Thomas charged. "Be careful. Accusing someone of murder has serious consequences. And who will believe you? A kid versus a respected businessman?" Robert gave Thomas a choice: stay and inherit everything, or leave with nothing. Thomas chose to leave. "Then grab your things and go. Tomorrow I'll change the locks." "The truth will come out," Thomas promised. Robert laughed. "The truth is just a narrative that the powerful control. And I'm very powerful." Thomas left for the last time. He was 20 years old, a few $100s, and had no clue how to survive. What Thomas didn't know was that Robert's revenge would be far more cruel. 3 days later, Robert executed the second part of his plan. 3 days after Thomas left home, Robert Harrison began making phone calls. The first went to Dr. Marcus Chen, a medical examiner who had treated Sarah in the past and who owed Robert considerable favors. "I need a death certificate," Robert said calmly on the phone. "To my son." There was a long pause. "Mr. Harrison, is your son dead?" "It will be, on paper at least." The second phone call was to Samuel Brooks, the owner of a funeral home that Robert had helped financially years ago when the business nearly went bankrupt. "I need a funeral," Robert explained. Coffin closed. "No body. This is irregular, Mr. Harrison. $50,000 say otherwise." The third phone call was to James Peterson, a police officer who had received generous donations from Robert over the years. "I need an accident report," Robert said. "My son, fatal car accident." Body too disfigured for visual recognition. "Mr. Harrison, this is falsification of official documents. 100,000 in cash." Within 72 hours, Thomas Harrison was officially dead. Car accident on state highway, head-on collision with a truck, instant death. The body was so badly damaged that identification was made only by dental records confirmed by a dentist who received his own generous sum. Robert arranged the funeral in Connecticut, far from Manhattan where Thomas could accidentally be seen. He invited only distant family and acquaintances who had not seen Thomas recently. The sealed coffin rested in front of the church, white flowers covering its polished surface. Robert cried, crocodile tears that convinced everyone that it was a devastated father losing his only son shortly after losing his wife. Meanwhile, Thomas was 3 states away, living in a hostel in Philadelphia, with no idea he was dead. He had tried to return home twice in the first few days, but found the mansion empty, quickly sold to a family of executives. The neighbors didn't know where Robert had gone. Thomas tried to call. The numbers were disconnected. Tried email. The accounts were closed. It was as if his entire family had been erased from existence. With no money for college, no job references, no family to fall back on, Thomas began the downward spiral that would eventually lead him to the streets of Manhattan. In the present, Melissa Carter was sitting in a posh cafe on the Upper East Side, her cup of cappuccino cooling as she studied the laptop screen. 3 days had passed since the meeting with the beggar, and the image of him had not left her mind. She had tried to forget. "I had really tried, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw those green eyes. Every time she looked at Robert, she saw guilt written on every line of his face. So she did what any reasonable person would do when she could no longer ignore the truth. She hired a private investigator. Derek Stone had come highly recommended, a former NYPD detective who now worked on private cases. His office was small but professional, located in a low-key building in Brooklyn. "Let me see if I got it right," Derek said when Melissa explained the situation. He was a man in his mid-50s, gray hair cut short, sharp eyes that seemed to see through lies. "Do you want me to investigate if your boyfriend's dead son is actually alive and living on the streets?" "I know what it sounds like," Melissa admitted, "but there's something wrong. His reaction, the resemblance of the beggar, I need to know the truth." Derek studied the photo of Thomas that Melissa had brought, then the photo she had taken of the beggar from afar. "The resemblance is remarkable," he admitted. "Okay, I will accept the case. But I need to warn you, if I find something you won't like—" "I want to know," Melissa interrupted him. "It doesn't matter what it is." It took Derek only 5 days to begin digging up the truth, and what he found was much worse than Melissa imagined. "The death certificate is fake," Derek explained at their next meeting, scattering documents on the table. "Well done, but false. The coroner who signed it. He received a payment of $75,000 3 days before the date of the alleged accident. The funeral home, $50,000. The police officer who signed the report, $100,000. All transfers from offshore accounts linked to Robert Harrison." Melissa felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. Did he fake the death of his own son?" "It seems so. And there's more." Derek pulled out another document. "I was able to track down Thomas Harrison. He has been registered in several Manhattan hostels for the past 10 years. Occasional arrests for public drunkenness, treatments in rehabilitation clinics that he never completed. Derek paused. "He only found out about his mother's death 3 years after the fact. Through an old newspaper he found in the trash." "Oh my God," Melissa whispered, tears burning her eyes. "That poor man—" "There's one more thing you need to know," Derek said gently. "Sarah Harrison, Robert's wife, her death was officially classified as an accidental overdose. But looking at the medical records, the dosages she normally took, it would be almost impossible to accidentally take a lethal dose. It's curious that it happened exactly 1 day after Thomas and Robert had that big argument." Melissa looked at Derek, horror growing in her eyes. "You're saying that Robert—" "I'm saying that there are a lot of unanswered questions, and they all point to your boyfriend." Melissa left Derek's office in shock. She walked the streets of Manhattan for hours, trying to process it all. the man she had kissed, with whom she had slept, with whom she had considered marrying. He was a monster that had destroyed his own family, and she had to do something about it. The first thing Melissa did was find Thomas. Derek had given him the places where he used to stay, the hostels and bridges where he slept. It took 2 days, but she finally found him in a park near the Hudson River, sleeping on a bench with his battered backpack as a pillow. "Thomas?" She approached slowly, her voice soft. "Thomas Harrison." The man sat up sharply, his eyes confused and suspicious. So up close, she could better see the damage that 15 years on the streets had caused. His face was aged beyond his 35 years, marked by scars and alcohol. But those green eyes were still there, they were still human. They were still Sarah's son. Who wants to know? His voice was rough, defensive. "My name is Melissa. I met your father." Thomas laughed bitterly. "My father is dead. He died 15 years ago along with my mother and my life." "No," Melissa said, sitting on the bench next to him. "Your father is very much alive, and I need you to tell me your story. All of it." For the next 3 hours at a cafe where Melissa bought food that Thomas devoured as if he hadn't eaten in days, he told everything. The discovery of the sabotage, the confrontation with Robert, the expulsion from the house, the attempts to return that failed, and finally the worst, finding out about his mother's death years later through an old newspaper. "I tried to go to the funeral," Thomas said, tears running down his dirty cheeks. "But it was over. She had been buried for 3 years and I didn't even know it. I couldn't even say goodbye. And it was my fault. If I hadn't confronted him, if I had kept quiet." "It wasn't your fault," Melissa said, firmly holding his hands. "None of this was his fault. Your father. He did terrible things, things I can't let go. What are you going to do?" Thomas asked suspiciously. Melissa smiled, but there was no humor in it. "Justice. I will do justice." The Manhattan Annual Benefit Gala was the social event of the season. 1,000 guests, all dressed in tuxedos and haute couture dresses, gathered in the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel. Businessmen, politicians, celebrities, all the city's elite in one place. Robert Harrison was at the center of it all, as always. He had donated $500,000 to that night's cause, securing his name in gold letters on the show. Melissa stood by his side, stunning in a navy blue Valentino gown, smiling for the cameras. But Robert did not know that this would be the last social event of his life as a free man. "Honey," Melissa whispered, touching her arm, "I need to make a quick announcement about the new foundation I'm creating. Do you care?" Robert kissed her cheek. "Of course not, my love. You know I support all of your causes." Melissa took the stage when it was her turn to speak. The hall fell silent, all eyes on her. She held the microphone, took a deep breath, and began. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. Tonight I'd like to talk about something very important to me. Truth and justice," Robert frowned. "That wasn't in the script. Look, I recently discovered something disturbing," Melissa continued, her voice echoing through the room. "I discovered that someone I knew, someone I trusted, had destroyed his own family through lies, manipulation and cruelty." Robert began to stand up, but 2 security guards Melissa had hired positioned themselves behind him. "Sit down, Mr. Harrison," one of them said quietly. "I'd like to present some evidence," Melissa said, nodding to the sound technician. The giant screen behind her lit up. The first image was of Thomas's death certificate, then bank records showing the payments, then photos of Thomas on the streets, and finally, a video that Derek had recorded. Thomas telling his story, his voice broken but clear. The hall erupted in shocked whispers. Photographers' cameras began to fire. Reporters rushed forward. Robert Harrison, Melissa said, her eyes fixed on him, faked his son's death because the boy discovered that he had systematically sabotaged his own wife's career, leading her to severe depression and eventually death. Thomas Harrison is alive. It has been on the streets of Manhattan for 15 years. And tonight we will correct that injustice. The doors of the hall opened. Officers entered, led by a detective whom Derek had convinced to reopen the case. And behind them, clean and dressed in the simple but decent clothes that Melissa had bought, was Thomas Harrison. The hall was absolutely silent. Thomas walked slowly to the front, his eyes fixed on Robert. The father and son faced each other for the first time in 15 years. "Hi, Dad," Thomas said quietly. "I missed you at my funeral." Robert tried to speak, but no sound came out. Her skin was gray, sweat glistening on her forehead. "Robert Harrison," the detective said, "you are under arrest for falsifying public documents, fraud, and we are reopening the investigation into the death of Sarah Harrison." The handcuffs clicked on Robert's wrists as the hall erupted in chaos. Reporters shouted questions, guests pulled out their phones, photographers vied for the best angles. Melissa came down from the stage and walked over to Thomas, taking his hand. "Are you okay?" Thomas nodded, tears running down his face. I can't believe that's happening." "Believe me," Melissa said firmly, "and it's just the beginning." As Robert was led out in handcuffs, past people who had been his friends and business associates, he looked back one last time. His eyes met Thomas's, and for the first time in 15 years there was genuine fear there. Fear of consequences, fear of justice, fear of finally paying for everything he had done. The following months were a whirlwind. The story exploded all over the news. "Billionaire faked death of own son" was the headline in every newspaper. Robert's lawyers tried to hush it up, but Derek had done his job well. The evidence was irrefutable. The investigation into Sarah's death has been reopened. New toxicology tests, interviews with people who knew her, analysis of medical records, and slowly the truth emerged. The dosages Sarah had received were not compatible with normal prescription. Someone had manipulated his medications. Robert was charged with manslaughter. His business empire collapsed as partners grew apart. Contracts were cancelled, stocks plummeted. The fortune of billions shrank to millions in a matter of months. Drained by legal fees and lawsuits, Melissa used every penny of her own inheritance to create the Sarah Harrison Recovery Center, named after Thomas's mother. It was a state-of-the-art facility for the treatment of chemical dependency and trauma, with a special focus on homeless people. Thomas was the first resident. The rehabilitation was brutal. Years of alcoholism don't go away easily. There were days where Thomas begged to give up, where the physical and emotional pain was so intense that he just wanted to go back to the streets where drinking at least numbed everything. But Melissa was there. Every single day, holding his hand during crises, wiping away his sweat during tremors, reminding him of who he was before the streets broke him. "Why are you doing this?" Thomas asked one night 6 months after starting treatment. "Why do you care so much?" Melissa was quiet for a long moment. "Because the family I grew up with was like yours. Rich, dysfunctional, toxic. My parents divorced when I was 10, fighting over money and property, using me as a weapon against each other. I learned early on that blood does not mean family. Love means family. And you deserve love." Thomas began to cry, not the bitter tears of pain he had cried so many times, but tears of relief, of hope. Slowly, day after day, he began to recover. The tremors subsided. The fog in his mind cleared. He began to eat regularly, to sleep without constant nightmares, to laugh again. Robert was sentenced to 20 years in prison. He lost everything: money, reputation, freedom. His only companion in solitary confinement were his memories and his regrets. 3 years after that night at the plaza, Thomas was completely sober. He had gone back to school, completed his degree in sociology, and now worked at the center Melissa had created, helping other homeless people find their way back. It was on a spring afternoon, with flowers blooming in the downtown gardens, that Thomas knelt in front of Melissa. "I don't have an expensive ring," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "I don't have a fortune or a mansion, but I have something that I learned is worth more. I have true love, and I want to spend the rest of my life showing you what it means to be loved by someone who understands that family is choice, not blood. Melissa Carter, will you marry me?" Melissa was crying, but smiling so brightly that it seemed to light up the whole day. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." The wedding took place on an autumn morning, 3.5 years after that fateful night. It wasn't in the plaza or in some grandiose cathedral. It was in the garden of the Sarah Harrison Recovery Center, surrounded by flowers that the residents themselves had planted. Only 50 people were present. Former homeless people Thomas had helped, employees of the center, Derek Stone with his family, and some of Melissa's true friends. Thomas wore a simple, impeccable suit. His face was clean, his hair cut, but it was his eyes that showed the greatest transformation. Those green eyes that had been dead for so long now shone with life and love. The music began, something simple played by a string quartet. And then Melissa appeared. She wore a simple and elegant white silk dress. She walked alone because she had learned that she didn't need anyone to deliver her. She gave herself by choice. When his eyes met Thomas's, the rest of the world disappeared. The ceremony was short and intimate. The pastor spoke about redemption, about second chances, about how true love is not found in mansions, but in daily choices to stay and fight. Thomas Harrison, do you accept Melissa Carter as your wife? I accept. With every part of who I am. Melissa Carter, do you accept Thomas Harrison as your husband? I accept. With every part of who I am. When they kissed, the guests applauded. At that moment, there were only the two of them, two broken people who had chosen to heal together. During the reception, Thomas gave a speech. Many of you know my story, he began, holding Melissa's hand. And for a long time I thought my life was over when I left my father's house. He looked around, but I was wrong. I hadn't lost everything. He had lost empty things, money, status. What I gained was something valuable. I won myself back. I gained purpose. And I won her, the woman who saw me at my worst and believed in what I could become. Thomas pulled an envelope from his pocket. My father is in prison. For 3 years, he sent me letters asking for forgiveness. I burned them all without reading, but today I decided to write to him for the first time. He took a picture of the envelope, of him and Melissa kissing at the ceremony. I'll send only this. Hand on the back. Thomas turned the photo, showing what he had written. Mom would be proud of the man I've become, because the best revenge is not to destroy the one who hurt you, Thomas continued. It's becoming everything they never managed to be. My father spent his life accumulating power, thinking that it made him strong. But I learned that real strength is vulnerability. It is accepting love. It is choosing to build rather than destroy. He raised his glass. The morning that always comes, no matter how dark the night has been. In the morning, the guests repeated. 6 months later, Thomas was standing in front of a cemetery gate. Melissa held his hand as they walked to the tombstone. Sarah Elizabeth Harrison, 1965, 2010. She built beauty in a world that tried to break her. Thomas had the new tombstone made. The old one had only name and dates. This honored who Sarah really was. He knelt down, placing white orchids. Hi, Mom. Sorry for taking so long. I wasn't well enough before. But now I am. The wind blew gently. I married an amazing woman named Melissa. You'd like it. And we are helping people. We created a center in his name, helping homeless people and people that society has given up. He touched the tombstone. I found out the truth about what he did. And I'm sorry I didn't save you, but I promise to honor his memory by doing the opposite. I'm going to build it. I'm going to create. I'll help. Melissa knelt next to him. I'm going to take care of him, Sarah, I promise. Thomas looked at Melissa, then at the tombstone. For 15 years I thought I was dead inside. But you taught me that architecture is about creating beauty out of nothing. And that's what I did. I rebuilt my life using everything you taught me about compassion and never giving up. He whispered the words he had kept for so long. I'm sorry it took me so long to get home, Mum, but I did it. I won. I have love. I have a purpose. I have peace. I love you, Mom. I will always love. As they left, Thomas stopped and looked back. The sun illuminated the tombstone in a golden ray, and for the first time in 15 years, Thomas Harrison felt true peace. That night in a prison cell, Robert Harrison held a single photo of Thomas and Melissa's wedding. He had read the 7 words in the verse hundreds of times. Mom would be proud of the man I have become. Robert thought of Sarah, of how he had loved her selfishly. He thought of Thomas, the brilliant boy he threw out. He thought about all the choices that led him there alone with only regrets. Wealth has disappeared. The power evaporated. Respect was destroyed. And what was left? An old man who finally understood too late what mattered. He looked at his son smiling in the photo, genuinely happy, and Robert realized Thomas had won not in spite of him, but because of him. Robert's ruthlessness forged Thomas into something Robert could never be: human, compassionate, beloved. Robert placed the picture on the shelf of his cell, a constant reminder of everything he lost and would never regain. Outside, life went on. The Sarah Harrison Center thrived. helping hundreds. Thomas and Melissa planned to expand to other cities, and Sarah was finally at peace, knowing that her son not only survived but flourished. The story began with an accidental encounter, a beggar and a billionaire. But he ended up proving that redemption is possible, that love conquers hate, and that sometimes the best revenge is simply to live well and prove that goodness triumphs over cruelty. Thomas had started out as a privileged boy, become a broken man on the streets, and finally emerged whole. Not because he recovered his fortune, but because he found something more valuable. He found himself. He found true love. He found his purpose. And in the end, that was the only victory that really mattered.